Welcome to the Autonomic Healing Podcast. I'm Tom Pells.
And I'm Ruth Lorensson. We'll be unpacking what it looks like to activate your brain to holistically manage stress and trauma that bring healing to the mind, body, and spirit.
Being free to live authentically as humans.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started. So we're here in our wonderful conversation that we're about to have, which is, we're going through this ABCs of thriving, not just surviving. And last time we talked about creating contentment, which I loved. And I'm working on it, Tom.
Me and me and
exactly.
vocabulary.
But now we're talking about we're on D, and we're going to be talking about deferring to loving. So it's a brilliant topic and so important, Tom. But just kick us off. Let's frame up what we're actually going to be talking about in this conversation.
So this is in context. Where the ABCs start with is accept adversity. And there is adversity. That's just a thing. If you are alive, you're going to experience adversity. And we can accept that. And then as we accept adversity, we can believe in beneficence and value and live out doing good, doing things that are beneficial. That's particularly challenging when there's adversity because the inclination is to retreat or not do that or to return what you've been given. But we don't have to do that. We can believe in beneficence. And then that allows and naturally leads into creating contentment. Because stress and need often mitigate against contentment. It doesn't mean we can't experience contentment. We can create contentment. Which, if we accept adversity and we believe in beneficence and we create contentment, naturally sets the stage for love. Not love.
So let's just, before we really dive deep into deferring to loving, let's just talk about the language there, because we have specifically decided to call it loving rather than love.
Yes.
And that's not just like, a mistake.
It's not semantics.
No. It's actually on purpose because there is a big difference there. So this isn't defer to love. This is defer to loving. So can you just talk about that a little bit? Like, what is the difference there between, people have they have misunderstandings around the word love. And one of the things that we've talked about before is perceptions. And one of the perceptions that both me and you actually have is, these are the seemingly rational perceptions. These are the things that seem perfectly rational in our mind,
very compelling,
but actually aren't really rational at all.
No.
So one of those is love me tender. And for both of us have that, and it's quite a common one actually. But the thing about love me tender is that it has love in the whole phrase, and yet it's a very detrimental state to be in because it's so needy. It can be. And the actual alternative is to be loving.
Yes.
And so talk about the differences there, Tom. Like, why loving instead of love?
Yes. And the reason I titled it "Love Me Tender" is because of that Elvis song. Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfill. Right. And what do you do if that's not reciprocated, or if that other person isn't, for whatever reason, going to or interested in fulfilling your dreams? Is that then not loving?
Can I just say before you go on, that was a very good Elvis impression.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And I'm enjoying hearing more of your singing in these podcasts. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes. And if you look up love in Wikipedia, okay, love encompasses a range of strong and positive emotional and mental states. strong, yes. Positive emotional and mental states. From the most sublime virtue or good habit, the deepest interpersonal affection, to the simplest pleasure. An example of this range of meanings is that the love of a mother differs from the love of a spouse, which differs from the love for food. Most commonly, love refers to a feeling of strong attraction and emotional attachment. What caught my attention was positive emotional and mental states. That's why it's about loving, not defer to love. It's defer to loving, because if you're loving, that can be painful, and it can be a productive pain, and it may not feel positive and wonderful and all of that. It can be a very loving thing to do that can hurt horribly and painfully.
Yeah, and I think that this is why, I mean, we were talking about this before we started recording, about how, you know, with the defer to loving, actually, I asked you, well, is that true? Is that something that we should do all the time? Because, you know, what happens if you're loving someone and they're not, you know, actually loving you back? Or, you know, should you stay there? Like, why are you deferring to love? Or shouldn't you depart from love? You know, shouldn't get the hell out of there, you know? So that's...
Bye-bye.
And that's, again, the difference here of loving. And what you're saying is actually the definition of loving isn't about this positive feeling. Because actually, if you do defer to loving in difficult spaces where maybe you're not, that love isn't being reciprocated. I can't say that word.
Reciprocated.
Reciprocated. Yeah. Tongue twist. Then it's not going to have those positive feelings. It's going to come with a full mix of feelings. And yeah, so can you just talk a little bit as to why you should stay in those situations or keep loving in those situations?
Yes. With Love Me Tender, it's the idea that my well-being, my self-image, my worth is dependent on you loving me and you doing nice things, you being and experiencing and reciprocating the love. That can easily degenerate into people-pleasing, because then we're all about, oh, what can I do to garner that and engender that and that sort of thing. And then, oh, how terrible it is if we don't have that, and the fear and all sorts of other things that can happen because of that. Where loving is just that. It's interesting that in the Wikipedia article, it goes on to say that love is considered to be both positive and negative, with its virtue representing human kindness, compassion, and affection, the unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of another. And sometimes that good of another isn't necessarily seen as a good for yourself, like the soldier who sacrifices his life and throws his body on a grenade and he saves all his companions. Ow. Very loving. It can be so tempting to, when there is the distress, where there is the adversity, where loving isn't reciprocated, or where loving is frankly dangerous, and has a negative impact. Mother Teresa in the slums of India, Gandhi. Also,
and then I'm reminded of that verse in the Bible that, you know, it says, "Greater love has no man than this, than he laid down his life for his friends." And so that isn't like all pleasant.
Oh, that doesn't fit into strong and positive emotional and mental states. No.
So I think what we're tapping into here is that, you know, we've got to be really careful. The loving, you know, the act of loving, the choice to be loving and defer to being loving, is not a feeling. It's and a lot of the time it will be in some level of difficult circumstances.
Yeah, because we're dealing with human beings. That can be messy.
So I want to talk about Tom because, like, I think I have a propensity in me to, when I sense that, you know, I'm, and it could be a friendship, it could be like all, you know, the spectrum of all of the different, we know there's different types of loves, right? We know there's different, because there's different relationships.
And even things we call love.
Yes.
Which isn't actually love at all.
So I was just going to say that when I start sensing that I'm being loving, I'm like being me, doing the things that I feel are loving. And then, you know, over time that is just like, you know, the penny starts dropping that, oh, okay, you know, this isn't coming back. This isn't equal, or at least in my perceptions, that's the case. My propensity is to get the hell out of there. Like my default setting is not to defer to love. It's loving. It's to, you know, depart, really, to protect myself.
Yes, and that's what the impulse is from. I'm in danger. I'm in risk. I'm going to be self-protective, and I'm withdrawing. Bye-bye. I'm just not going to risk that, because to defer to loving is to intentionally choose risk, but it's a beneficial, productive risk. Because what's the alternative? Now you don't have loving, you don't have that other person, you don't have the situation, and by withdrawing, it's
one of the things
getting into those core issues with the tsunami of stress, feeling insecure and inadequate, and then I feel powerless, and then it's a control issue, and everything and others have it, and I don't, and now my self-image and self-esteem are suffering. It's not cultivating those strengths of rational intimacy, which is being secure and content. Yeah, there's stress, there's need, but I can perceive myself as secure and capable. Why? Because I'm loving, and my well-being isn't determinative, isn't being determined by the person's reaction one way or another.
And that's the key there, because, you know, the difference between, because what we're not advocating for is to defer to loving in places that are abusive. For sure.
Absolutely not.
You know,
because that's not loving.
It isn't.
It's
not
loving
point.
To the other person.
Yeah, or
it's not
yourself.
Loving to yourself.
But the core of being able to defer to loving is to, it starts with yourself. We've always said that, you know, is this loving to myself? And then you can, out of that space, you can continue to love regardless of what is happening at you back. And one of the things that you said to me earlier, which felt interesting and a little bit of a perspective shift for me, is what you said to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said to me that if you defer to loving and you don't like depart, but you can continue because you're loving yourself, and out of that space you continue to love, you're not going anywhere. No. Like, you're not the one who's leaving. You allow others to, they can either stay in that space or they can leave. Yes. And I thought that was really different to me, because then it grounds, if we stop departing and leaving and running away, it grounds us in our own loving. And then I guess, you know, we're not in control of what other people want to do with that or not, you know.
Or empowering them to choose.
But I think when I look back through my own experiences, I've done the opposite. I'm the one who leaves. Like, why should I leave when I'm I'm offering the love? So I don't know whether you've got anything to say about that, but I think that there's something there that's key, you know, about deferring to loving. Number one, it's not about a pleasant feeling necessarily, but it's about choosing to be who you are in that space, to love well in that space, yourself and others. And then if for whatever reason the people around you don't want to be in that environment, they can leave, they depart, not you.
Yes. Because loving people is just that. It's loving people, and people can be painful. We can be painful. It can be painful for people to love us and to be loving to us when we're not in a great place. But the nature of loving is that it's there. It's offered. It's available. Now, it has boundaries because it's not loving, certainly, for abuse to continue. That's not loving to yourself or the other. But to say if it doesn't feel good and it's not reciprocated, no, that's not loving either. And to respond negatively to that. One of the things in our prior conversation, before we had the conversation we're recording, is that you brought up Beauty and the Beast.
I did.
Go ahead.
Well, it's we just came out off the back of a holiday weekend. So me and my daughter Penny were watching Beauty and the Beast, the latest version with Emma Watson, which I love. Like, it's one of my. I feel like I like the story, but I also think that the way they did that film was beautiful and just very. I've watched it a number of times, so I watched it. And, it's the classic love story of this romantic love of, this beast that no one would fall in love with. And then Beauty, who's intelligent and beautiful on the inside and out. And then obviously this connection that they end up falling in love. And anyway, and I love the songs. And I'm there on my... See, I do my singing too, Tom, but I don't do it on the podcast. But I was there on my couch singing. And then I remember as the credits were rolling at the end, I had this weird feeling, and I was just paying attention to myself, but I felt like kind of like dissatisfied and just like, I think, and then I was curious about this, my appetite and my desire in me for romance and romantic love. And I was curious as to whether that was real or whether that was
a fabrication
Hollywood.
of Disneyland.
Yeah, and the songs and everything. And like, so I just brought it up, and I was just thinking about love in the context of that story. I mean, it's one of the classic French stories of all time. So and the deep emotional connection, which is what they share. If you think about it, though, the whole point is that he's a beast, and he became very beastly because he didn't understand being loving. I mean, that was the core story.
That's the core of the story. How he wound up a beast.
So it was his lesson.
Did not defer to loving. And how she wound up in a very compromised situation was because of all those characters around her, which were making her life dangerous and her father's life dangerous. And they were just trying to do some good things, but people had malevolent intents about her, and how circumstances threw them together. And in the story, at some point, he realizes how beastly he's being to her and how unloving he's being to her. And he says, I'm not going to hold you captive. Leave. And she says, no. And it all works out. They save Papa and all the rest of that. But the point is, they risked, and they both deferred to being loving in their own ways. And that's magical.
Yeah, so there is something magical, and there's a true desire in us. And it doesn't even have to be applied to the romantic love, but the desire for that connection with another person. But yeah, it takes risk.
And it is inherent in our needs. Go back to the podcast we had about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food, shelter, basics of just surviving, yes. And then safety, yes. And then loving. It's gotten, his original loving got turned into community and connection and all the rest of that, but it was loving. And we can defer to loving because that is the natural next progression from accepting adversity and dealing with that. It's about believing in beneficence, that it is good and it is all good. And that's not just a trite marketing phrase by some company. It literally can be beneficial, no matter how detrimental somebody means it to be or not. It all can be and often is beneficial in ways we just never saw coming. Like Beauty and the Beast, neither one of them saw the beneficial thing coming, and yet there it was for the taking and the receiving. And then the creating contentment, where it could be so easily to become discontented. Beauty, Beast, they were both struggling with a sense of contentment in their lives because of circumstances, because of the nature of their interaction or relationship. She's a hostage. He's a beastly, needy. If I don't have this, I'm going to remain forever a beast. And I don't want that. But I have to fall in love before those petals drop. What? And here she is. I guess this is it, but this is so convoluted and conflicted. And she found a way to rescue her family and herself, and happily ever after. It doesn't mean happily ever after, but if we defer to loving, we create a much greater likelihood that there is just that.
Yeah. Why do you think, I'm just curious, why do you think we find it difficult to defer to love? What do you think are the challenges there? Because obviously the Beast, I think, was a good example of, at the beginning, he isn't deferring to love, which is why he ends up became
a beast. Yes.
Yeah, he became a beast, and actually is a very poignant picture, really, of like we can become beastly in our need of love if we don't defer to loving, just like the Beast.
Yep.
But I'm just curious, Tom, what you think in terms of, because obviously, it sounds great, defer to loving, but actually this is why we have stories like Beauty and the Beast, because they are inherent human struggles to get this, to grab hold of this. So what do you think some of the key things? I mean, I've mentioned mine, which are I just depart from love.
It's risk.
Yeah.
Because even where loving is the issue, there's inherently risk in that.
So his risk, the Beast, was actually when he realised that not only was he in love with her, but he was going to choose to be loving, was that he was going to let her go. And the risk was that in that moment, he could have stayed a beast. That was his risk.
Yep.
But yet he deferred to loving in that
And by
moment.
doing so, got to be who he really was, not the caricature of the nasty, beastly prince, but the prince.
And then maybe it's not, what do you think about, obviously there's this choice to risk something, but what about the, I wonder whether there's just that, our reaction to pain. Our reaction,
totally involved in that.
Yeah, like our reaction to being uncomfortable and being stressed. I mean, they say that about love, don't they? It's like the best and worst thing that can happen to you, falling in love. It's like, you have those euphoric feelings, and then also this anxiety can be produced when you fall in love with someone.
Yes.
So I wonder about the feelings that I wonder.
Defer to loving isn't just about romantic love and Beauty and the Beast and all the rest of that. It's about, how do I get along with these people who hate me, who despise me? How do I return love and benefit when what's been given is everything but that? wars and conflicts and I'm going to give you back what you've given to me and all the rest of that, it doesn't actually solve any problems. It just continues to escalate them, as we're seeing writ large on a world scale, but in a microcosm in so many people's lives. It's willing to risk knowing that loving does solve problems. It
That's
is
good.
the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not to be trite with a 1960s song. And love is the answer. No. When it's loving, it's willing to do what is beneficial. And it's not conditional on whether that's reciprocated, how it's responded to. It's just making oneself available to do beneficial things. Because doing beneficial things for others, even an enemy, love your enemies and pray for those who despitefully use you, has a payoff. Because it creates the opportunity and the context for reconciliation and for resolution, for connection, for restoration, where the other takes it away. So to do that for people, for someone else, is to do it for ourselves. And then we feel positive about ourselves. We respect ourselves for that. We can admire ourselves for that. Dare I say, we are loving to ourselves. And in being loving to others, it's loving to ourselves. Is that the natural inclination in response to pain and hurt and all the rest of that? No. That's the sympathetic nervous system flight or fight. I'm going to avoid. I'm out of here. Or here you go. Some back to you. But then the parasympathetic and homeostasis, because homeostasis is, as we've said, life. Recover, relax, rest, and digest. And those are fundamental qualities in all these wonderful stories that are so compelling to us. Let's just live them out. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that, so, there's in some ways what you're saying is that by deferring to loving, it's like a force in some ways. There's a force that stops that
fundamental
cycle.
Life energy.
Yeah, and it stops that cycle of detrimental, of, hate for hate versus hate,
Yes.
So when we defer to it, we're inherently doing something good. We're joining, we're partnering with a good force.
There it is.
That will bring about life and homeostasis.
Yep.
Not even just within ourselves, but within community. And so that's why, going back to our big title, that's why this is so crucial with thriving.
Yes.
Because surviving, maybe you can, if you defer to love, not loving, that will have its limitations. That will be, it will be determined by all sorts of things, possibly your own perceptions, what other people are doing. But if you choose to defer to loving and join in partnership with this good force, whether that is coming back at you or whether that you're a lone ranger, then what you're doing is that you're entering this space of thriving in life, and allow others to thrive with you too. So
yes.
So I think that's the core of it. It doesn't come easily. It comes with pain sometimes.
Yes.
It comes with a choice. And sometimes you feel alone. You can feel alone in it, but believing that overall you're doing something good by deferring to loving will allow you to access that thriving.
Yep, because to defer to loving may not lead to a happily ever after, but to defer to loving is to defer to well-being. Our own and others, what they do with it, they get to choose. But at least you've created the context for there to be choice. You've been listening to the Autonomic Healing Podcast.
Join us next time as we continue in our conversations with Tom. If you're interested in pursuing your own autonomic healing journey and want to find a practitioner, visit our website, innerworkings.org. See you at the next episode.